Las Vegas, August 15th, 1962. Marilyn Monroe stepped onto the Flamingo Hotel stage, her sequined gown catching the spotlight like captured starlight. She had no idea that somewhere in the third row sat a 4-year-old boy who would soon become the most famous entertainer on earth. This is the incredible true story of the night that changed music history forever. If you love untold stories about music legends, hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments what other iconic moments you'd like us to explore. Katherine Jackson adjusted her purse nervously as she walked through the bustling lobby of the Flamingo Hotel. She hadn't planned to be here tonight. Her sister-in-law, Rebecca, had called just hours earlier with an offer too good to refuse. "Katherine, honey, I've got 2 tickets to see Marilyn Monroe tonight. My husband's stuck at work, and I can't go alone. Want to come with me?" Katherine's first thought had been of her children. Joe was working late at the steel mill, and someone needed to watch the kids. But 4-year-old Michael had been so well behaved lately, and he loved music more than anything in the world. "Can I bring Michael?" Katherine had asked. "He's so quiet, and he loves hearing people sing." Now, walking through the glittering casino toward the showroom, Katherine wondered if she'd made the right choice. Michael's small hand gripped hers tightly, his wide eyes taking in everything around him. "Mama, why is everyone so excited?" Michael whispered, his voice barely audible above the chatter of the crowd. "We're going to see a very special lady sing, baby," Katherine replied, smoothing down his small bow tie. "She's like a magical princess who can make everyone happy with her voice." Michael nodded solemnly, as if he understood the importance of this moment. Even at 4 years old, there was something different about Michael Jackson. When music played on their radio at home, he didn't just listen. He absorbed it, moved to it, became part of it. But what happened next would prove that some children are born with music flowing through their very souls. The lights dimmed, and 1,200 people fell silent in anticipation. Katherine lifted Michael onto her lap so he could see over the heads in front of them. When the spotlight hit the stage and Marilyn Monroe emerged from behind the velvet curtain, the room exploded with applause. She was everything the legends said and more. Her platinum blonde hair seemed to glow with its own light, and her famous curves were accentuated by a stunning silver gown that sparkled with every movement. But it was her presence that truly commanded the room, that indefinable quality that made everyone feel like she was singing just for them. "Good evening, Las Vegas." Marilyn's breathy voice floated through the room like silk. "Are you ready to have some fun tonight?" The crowd roared its approval, but 4-year-old Michael Jackson was transfixed in a completely different way. While everyone else was captivated by Marilyn's glamour and charm, Michael was listening, really listening, to something deeper. "She sounds like an angel, Mama," he whispered, never taking his eyes off the stage. Marilyn began her opening number. "Diamonds are a girl's best friend," and her voice filled every corner of the showroom. She moved with grace and confidence, working the crowd like the professional she was. But then something unexpected happened. As she transitioned into her second song, "I Want to Be Loved by You," a small, pure voice from somewhere in the audience began humming along in perfect harmony. Little did anyone know that this tiny voice would soon echo in stadiums around the world. At first, Katherine tried to quiet her son. "Michael, shh, let the lady sing," she whispered, gently placing her finger over his lips. But Michael wasn't being disruptive. His small voice was so naturally in tune, so perfectly complementary to Marilyn's, that the people sitting nearby began to notice an elderly woman in pearls turned around and smiled. A businessman in an expensive suit leaned forward to listen more carefully. "Mama," Michael whispered urgently, his eyes still fixed on the stage. "I know this song, it's in my heart." And indeed, somehow he did know it. Though he'd never heard "I Want to Be Loved by You" before this moment, Michael was humming along as if he'd known the melody his entire life. His tiny voice rose and fell with Marilyn's, creating an unconscious duet that sent chills through anyone close enough to hear it. Katherine watched in amazement as her son seemed to enter a trance-like state. This was beyond anything she'd seen from him before. At home, Michael loved to sing along to the radio, but this was different. This was magical. Marilyn Monroe, meanwhile, was halfway through her second verse when she heard it. At first, she thought it might be someone in her backup band humming along, But the voice was too pure, too young, too perfect to be coming from behind her. She paused mid-note, her famous blue eyes scanning the audience. The room held its breath. What Marilyn did next had never been done before in the history of Las Vegas entertainment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marilyn said, her voice filled with wonder and curiosity, "I hear an angel singing with me tonight. I simply must find this beautiful voice. Where are you, little angel?" The spotlight operator, confused but following his instincts, began slowly sweeping the light across the audience. People looked around, murmuring and pointing, trying to identify the source of the mysterious harmony. Michael, overwhelmed but not afraid, slowly stood up on his chair. His small silhouette was illuminated as the spotlight found him, and he raised one tiny hand in a shy wave. "Here, Miss Marilyn," his clear voice rang out across the silent showroom. "I'm here." The audience gasped collectively. Here was this impossibly small boy, dressed in his Sunday best, waving at the most famous woman in the world with the confidence of someone 3 times his age. Marilyn's hand flew to her heart. She had met thousands of children throughout her career, but there was something different about this one. Even from the stage, she could see a light in his eyes that reminded her of herself when she was young and full of dreams. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she called out, shielding her eyes from the stage lights to see him better. "Michael Jackson," he replied proudly, his voice carrying clearly thanks to the perfect acoustics of the showroom. "Michael Jackson," Marilyn repeated slowly, as if testing how the name felt on her lips. "What a wonderful name for a wonderful voice. Would you like to come up here and sing with me?" The crowd erupted in encouraging cheers and applause. Catherine looked terrified, her 4-year-old son on stage with Marilyn Monroe. But before she could object, Michael was already moving. Nobody in that room could have predicted what happened next. An usher appeared as if by magic, gently taking Michael's hand and guiding him through the crowd toward the stage. People reached out to touch him as he passed, sensing they were witnessing something historic. Michael walked with the poise of a much older child, never looking back, never showing fear. Catherine watched with her heart in her throat as her baby boy climbed the steps to the stage. The spotlight followed his every move, and she could see his small face glowing with joy and excitement. Marilyn knelt down as Michael reached her, bringing herself to his eye level. Up close, she was even more beautiful than she appeared from the audience. But Michael wasn't intimidated. He smiled at her with the natural charm that would one day captivate billions. "Hello, Miss Marilyn," he said politely, just as Catherine had taught him to greet adults. "Hello, Michael," she replied, her famous voice gentle and warm. "You have the most beautiful voice I've ever heard from someone so young. Do you like to sing?" "Oh, yes, ma'am," Michael nodded enthusiastically. "I sing all the time. Mama says I was humming before I could talk." Marilyn's heart melted completely. Here was a child who understood music the way she understood performance. It wasn't something they did, it was something they were. "Well then, Michael Jackson," she said, standing and taking his small hand in hers, "let's give these nice people something special to remember." What happened next would become one of the most talked about moments in entertainment history. Marilyn led Michael to the center of the stage, where a single microphone stood waiting. The height was perfect for her, but far too tall for a 4-year-old. Without missing a beat, she knelt down again, this time holding the microphone at Michael's level. "Do you know Happy Birthday, Michael?" "Yes, ma'am," he replied with enthusiasm. "I know lots of songs." The bandleader looked confused, but Marilyn nodded to him confidently. "Give us a nice, slow version of Happy Birthday," she called out. "We're singing it for this beautiful evening." What happened next was nothing short of miraculous. As the music began, Marilyn and 4-year-old Michael Jackson sang Happy Birthday together, not to anyone in particular, but to the magic of the moment itself. Michael's voice, even at his tender age, had an otherworldly quality that seemed to reach directly into people's souls. The audience sat in stunned silence, many with tears streaming down their faces. This wasn't just entertainment. It was witnessing the birth of something extraordinary. Michael sang with perfect pitch, perfect timing, and an emotional depth that should have been impossible for someone so young. As their voices blended together, something incredible happened. Marilyn looked down at this tiny boy and saw herself reflected in his eyes. The same hunger for the spotlight, the same natural understanding of how to connect with an audience, the same star quality that couldn't be taught or manufactured. But she also saw something else, a child with extraordinary talent who would need protection from the world that would eventually want to consume him. And then Marilyn Monroe did something that would echo through music history. As the last notes of Happy Birthday faded away, Marilyn kept her eyes locked on Michael's. The showroom was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Everyone sensed that something profound was happening, though they couldn't quite understand what. Marilyn reached out and gently touched Michael's cheek. "Michael Jackson," she said softly, but the microphone carried her words to every corner of the room. "You are going to be a star someday, a very, very big star." Then in a gesture that surprised everyone, including herself, Marilyn leaned down and kissed Michael gently on the forehead. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a blessing, a passing of something magical from one generation to the next. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marilyn announced, standing and placing her hand protectively on Michael's shoulder, "I want you all to remember this night. Remember this little boy. Remember the name Michael Jackson, because I promise you, someday the whole world is going to know who he is." The audience erupted in thunderous applause. Some people were crying openly, moved by the beauty and innocence of what they just witnessed. Others were already turning to their companions, whispering about this extraordinary child they just discovered. Michael beamed with joy, but he wasn't overwhelmed by the attention. Instead, he seemed to absorb it, to feed off the energy of the crowd. Even at 4 years old, he understood instinctively that this was where he belonged. But the most incredible part of this story was still to come. As Michael made his way back to his seat, something remarkable happened. The standing ovation continued, but it shifted. People weren't just applauding Marilyn anymore. They were applauding him. This 4-year-old boy had somehow managed to steal a piece of the spotlight from one of the most famous women in the world, and she had given it to him willingly. Catherine watched through tears as her son walked back down the aisle. He moved differently now, with a confidence and grace that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. When he reached their row, he climbed onto her lap and whispered, "Did I do good, Mama?" "You did perfect, baby," she whispered back, holding him tight. "You were absolutely perfect." Marilyn continued her performance, but the energy in the room had changed forever. She had planned to sing 6 more songs, but she found herself thinking about young Michael Jackson. During her next number, Some Like It Hot, she kept glancing down at the third row, where she could see his small face glowing in the reflected stage lights. After the show, as Marilyn was preparing to leave, her manager approached her backstage. "Marilyn, that was unexpected, but the audience loved it. They're calling it the most memorable show you've ever done in Vegas." "That little boy," Marilyn said thoughtfully, removing her stage jewelry. "There's something special about him. Mark my words, Frank. We're going to see great things from Michael Jackson." 20 years later, those words would prove to be one of the most accurate predictions in entertainment history. The news of what happened that night spread quickly through Las Vegas and beyond. By the next morning, several newspapers had picked up the story of the mystery child who sang with Marilyn Monroe. A photograph taken by a lucky audience member with a camera showed Marilyn kneeling beside Michael on stage, both of them glowing in the spotlight. But for the Jackson family, the real change was in Michael himself. Catherine later revealed that her son talked about that night constantly for months afterward. He would stand in front of their small bathroom mirror, practicing moves and pretending he was back on stage with Marilyn. That night changed him, Catherine would remember years later. He went from being a child who loved music to a child who knew that music was his destiny. He started asking when he could perform again, when he could get back on a stage. Joe Jackson, when he heard the story, was initially skeptical. But when he saw the newspaper photograph and heard his neighbors talking about his son's performance, he began to see possibilities he'd never considered before. Maybe, he thought to himself, this boy has something special. Within 6 months, Joe would begin taking Michael and his brothers to amateur night competitions around Gary, Indiana. The Jackson 5 was born from the seeds planted that magical night in Las Vegas. But Michael never forgot the woman who first believed in him. For the rest of his life, Michael Jackson would credit that night in Las Vegas as the moment he knew he was meant to be a performer. He kept a copy of that newspaper photograph in every dressing room he ever used, from the smallest venues during the Jackson Five's early days to the massive stadiums he would fill as a solo artist. Marilyn Monroe saw something in me that night, Michael would often say in interviews decades later. She gave me permission to believe I could be magic. She told me I was going to be a star before I even knew what being a star meant. In 1982, when Thriller was breaking every record in the music industry, a reporter asked Michael about his earliest memory of performing. Without hesitation, he told the story of singing with Marilyn Monroe when he was 4 years old. "She kissed my forehead and told me I'd be famous someday," Michael said with a smile. "I think about that every time I walk on stage. I try to give my audience the same feeling she gave me that night, the feeling that anything is possible." The connection between Marilyn Monroe and Michael Jackson lasted far beyond that single evening. Both were sensitive souls who used their extraordinary talents to bring joy to the world. Both struggled with the pressures of fame and the loss of privacy that comes with being a global icon. And tragically, both left us far too soon. But on August 15th, 1962, for 3 perfect minutes on a Las Vegas stage, they shared something magical that would ripple through music history forever. And every time you hear Billie Jean or watch the moonwalk, remember this. It all started with a 4-year-old boy, a legendary actress, and one magical night when the universe conspired to create the king of pop today. Fans of both Marilyn Monroe and Michael Jackson often wonder what might have been if these two icons had been able to collaborate when Michael was older. The photograph from that night in 1962, showing Marilyn's gentle kiss on young Michael's forehead, remains one of the most treasured images in entertainment history. The Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas has since placed a small plaque in their showroom commemorating that magical evening. It reads, "On this stage, August 15th, 1962, Marilyn Monroe blessed a 4-year-old boy named Michael Jackson and told him he would be a star. She was right. Visitors from around the world come to see the spot where pop music history was forever changed by a spontaneous moment of recognition between two extraordinary talents." The plaque also includes Marilyn's prophetic words, "Remember this little boy. Remember the name Michael Jackson. Someday the whole world is going to know who he is." Some believe in destiny, others in coincidence. But everyone who was in that showroom on August 15th, 1962, knew they had witnessed something truly special. The moment when the future king of pop received his first royal blessing. The magic that began that night in Las Vegas continued to touch millions of lives around the world. And somewhere in the stars, perhaps Marilyn Monroe is smiling, knowing that her prediction about a small boy with an extraordinary voice came true beyond even her wildest dreams. This is how legends are born, not with fanfare or publicity campaigns, but in quiet moments of recognition when one artist sees the spark of greatness in another and takes the time to nurture it. The night that changed music forever began with a mother bringing her son to see a show. It ended with the world gaining its greatest entertainer. Sometimes the most important moments in history happen in the space of a single song. So what do you think about this incredible story? Did you ever imagine that Michael Jackson's path to stardom began with a magical moment on stage with Marilyn Monroe when he was just 4 years old? The fact that two of the most iconic figures in entertainment history shared such a profound connection shows us that destiny often works in the most unexpected ways. This story reminds us that sometimes the smallest gestures can have the biggest impact. Marilyn's decision to stop her show and bring a child on stage changed the course of music history. It makes you wonder what other incredible moments like this have happened that we don't even know about yet. Maybe your favorite artist has a similar hidden story that shaped their entire career. If this story gave you chills like it did us, make sure to hit that thumbs up button and share it with someone who loves music history. And don't forget to subscribe because we're constantly uncovering these amazing untold stories about the legends who shaped our culture. From secret collaborations to life-changing encounters, there's so much more to discover about the icons we thought we knew everything about. What other music legends would you like us to explore? Drop your suggestions in the comments below. We read every single one and love hearing from you. Maybe your suggestion will be our next incredible story to tell. Whether it's Elvis, Whitney Houston, Prince, or any other legend, we're always hunting for those magical moments that changed everything. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most magical moments happen when we least expect them. Until next time, keep believing in the power of music to change lives.